Ladies and gentlemen, the inauguration happening this upcoming Monday will be inside. Yes, due to the cold in Washington, D.C., we've had a very frigid winter here in Northeast Ohio. And with, you can see the polar vortex coming in, it's going to be cold in D.C. It's not going to be anything crazy for D.C. It's going to be very cold, though. I believe the low is 9 on Monday. You can see the chilly inauguration, the coldest Capitol ceremony in decades. The inauguration of Trump in D.C. is anticipated to be one of the coldest in recent history due to a polar vortex bringing Arctic air. Forecasts indicate temperatures in the low 20s, potential snow. The snow should be happening on Sunday. If you take a look at the weather forecast for the inauguration, you've got potential snow around a 40% chance Sunday mid-afternoon, high of 37 in D.C. And then on Monday, zero snow. Looks like it's going to be bright and sunny, but unfortunately, because of the cold, I don't know, it looks like 13-mile-per-hour wind, so you're probably talking about a wind chill, feels like temperature at around 10 degrees during the day, and then at night, a low of just 9 degrees. So very cold, especially for the DC area, and it's just been a colder winter. I tweeted about it yesterday here in Ohio and certainly in other places in the Northeast. I mean, Michigan has reported on it. You've got in New York as well. Very cold this year because we've had way more mild winters, at least the past 4 or 5 years. Now it's been really bad to where we've had the consistent, basically every single day is under 30 degrees, which is a problem, especially when you have snow that's already settled on pavement. Trying to get that off, you really can't because it hardens and then it turns into ice sometimes. So that's the issue. But when it comes to this, there are a few things I want to talk about with the inauguration. It being indoors, it's, it is what it is. I mean, some people say it's a blessing because there's been some talk about both the Obamas not being there, both the Clintons not showing up, both the Bushes, and then they're like, well, is something going to happen? Is there going to be a terrible threat against Donald Trump's life? I mean, how can people not speculate considering Trump nearly had his head blown off by some kid who was able to get on top of a roof at a rally back in July? Of course, people should have the right to speculate on Trump's safety based off of what happened previously. And then you had the golf course incident as well happening in Florida about a month and a half, 2 months later, whenever it was. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Certainly a lot easier in terms of the security indoors rather than outdoors. And you like the outdoor aesthetic of it with the natural light. There's no doubt about it. And it also, in terms of like the crowd size, it's going to be a little bit harder, but it is what it is. I mean, because of the cold, they're having it inside. It's unfortunate because it is going to be sunny. It's going to be sunny in DC. It's just going to be very cold. And then Biden, during his final days, is doing all the prototypical stuff any president would do when the opposing party's about to come in, try and make Trump's life as tough as possible. Although really anything that happens in these final days, at least most of it, can easily be reversed by Donald Trump. I remember back in 2021, all of the executive orders Biden signed that certainly opened the border wide up. That was the main argument I would try and tell liberals about the executive orders that Biden signed in 2021. Their entire tune on immigration and the border changed completely in 2023 and 2024 when they realized they were going to lose because of the border situation. And then they said, no, we want a bill now that'll save the border. Well, why did you sign all those executive orders? But now Biden is doing some things. This one kind of caught my eye and a lot of people's eyes, basically saying that we now have a 28th Amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment. This was originally brought up back in the 1920s during the women's rights movements of the 50s and the 60s. It really caught fire, and the 38th state recently voted to ratify it. That happened in 2020. It was Virginia. And so now Biden thinks he can just declare it. Now it's the 28th Amendment. Well, no, because this has been such a long process. There's already been 5 states because you need 3/4 of the states to actually create the amendment. There's already been 5 of the states out of the 38 that have said, no, we don't want this anymore. So this doesn't even make sense what Biden is doing here. The 20th Amendment is the law of the land guaranteeing all Americans equal rights and protections under the law regardless of their sex. And so this is like Biden's big thing, like, oh, now I've just put in the 28th Amendment. But even Community Notes says there is no 28th Amendment. The Equal Rights Amendment was not ratified and based that analysis on binding legal precedent. So Biden comes out and announces there's this new 28th Amendment. It's total crap. Biden, I was going to do a video on him, and I don't know, maybe I should have done it. It doesn't really, but it's just like I was going to say this is why, everything that Biden did that was terrible. Obviously, when you do it from a conservative perspective, people just say whatever. They're going to try and list his achievements, but for me, it's hard because I just really don't believe Biden is in control of anything. And I think Biden is a good example of kind of how liberal the Democratic Party has gotten. There were some clips of Biden back like 2 or 3 years ago of him talking about the trans rights and the gay activists and stuff like that. And I remember a conservative saying, this guy, he's 80 years old. He believes none of this. He's believed none of it his entire life. He has to just say it now because this is how left the party is. And that it just seems like that is honestly correct. Like there's a lot of these establishment Democrats. The party's just gotten so left wing. I mean, I don't even know what Biden believes at this point. Like for 90% of your life, you've never believed in this, and now suddenly it just comes off as so disingenuous, and it's just like the Democrats are such a unit. It's like a robot unit, and once a certain thing becomes acceptable, everybody must buy into it and believe it because it feels like Biden has no actual thoughts. It's just the party overall. They tell you exactly what to say. Now you support this. Now you support that. You haven't supported it for 95% of your political career, but now you support it because liberals and Democrats support it. It's just this weird thing. I mean, I still think when you look at the Democrats, it is establishment Democrats. Obviously, you've got the very further left ones, the AOC types, although AOC is kind of becoming, more reined in because she's probably going to try and run for president at some point, probably, I would say 32 rather than 28. So I would say the Democratic Party still is fully establishment controlled at this point. But it's just interesting with Biden and like saying, well, Biden did this. I don't even, it's almost like it's hard to even say, well, Biden did this wrong because I just don't buy that Biden really was in control of anything. Honestly, I really don't. And if he was, that might even be more scary. He's just not capable, and he was never capable. Somebody that old. It's not even the fact that he was that old. It's the way he aged, right? There has to be context into it because obviously Trump is pretty old when you look at him, but he's still very mentally there. You can tell he's still making decisions. He's still at the forefront. He's still giving speeches. He's still doing. I mean, you go back to 2020, they had to hide Biden. Thankful, and I'm sure they loved the fact that the pandemic was around at that point because that killed Trump's economy, and it also allowed Biden to not have to go out and campaign because he's just old and he's incapable of doing 2 rallies within a day. He's just too old. I mean, and just the way he looks, there's just no energy there. So I don't know. That's just kind of my opinion on Biden. I think Biden will not be remembered fondly. Liberals are obviously going to try and I've already seen some liberals rank Biden at like 22nd in terms of presidents. There's just no way, especially just based off of the historic context when you look 20 years from now. They might try and manipulating it by saying, well, Biden stepped down because he loved the country and he knew he was old at that point. When in reality, it was very obvious that Biden wanted to run for re-election, and they basically forced him out because he was historically bad in that second debate or in that first debate, and he had zero chance of winning. His own party forced him out of the race because he was going to get beaten. I mean, that is historically horrible as a president, considering even though in 2024 you look around different countries, there was really not a big incumbent advantage. The idea that your own party would force you out because you're so bad, and they can say, well, it's just because of that debate. I mean, there's no way history can remember Biden fondly. There's just no way. And again, you're going to get liberals and liberal historians saying he did some good things and stuff like that. But I would imagine a lot of the good stuff that Biden did, like the Bipartisan Chips Act, there's been a lot of issues with that in terms of actually getting it off the ground and implementing things that they pass. And again, even something like that, it's bipartisan, meaning Republicans supported it as well. That was mainly to remove the alliance, the reliance on Taiwan for chips, considering China's going to have some influence over Taiwan. That's the reality. Whether or not they take them over, I hope that doesn't happen during Trump's administration. I mean, it would give Trump a chance to show good leadership if a situation arose with China and Taiwan. Although I don't know, from the things that I've heard about Trump, it does seem like I'm not too surprised, but it seems like Trump's going to want something from Taiwan in exchange for our military involvement in helping Taiwan defend against China. But there are a lot of, I mean, you look at Rubio, he's a China hawk. And so maybe it won't matter, depending. I mean, he put Rubio in there. Yeah, I mean, one thing that they cannot gloss over when it comes to the history books is Biden finishing more unpopular than Trump ever was in his first term. You look at the current approval rating, it is remarkable how bad it is. And then you're going to get the standard debates with inflation. It was caused by Trump. It was caused by the pandemic. Biden actually saved the country. He brought inflation down. Of course, you want to hammer those people on two specific things. The first one being the $1.9 trillion rescue plan that the Biden administration implemented, which significantly elevated inflation and made it worse. And the number two thing would be the expansion on unemployment benefits, which also made inflation significantly worse because it gave people a reason to stay home and not have to work. And then the employers had to raise wages to try and get people into work. And that's going to create even more inflation on top of that. And so there's a number of things that you can hammer these people on when it comes to them trying to deflect inflation and things. But like, honestly, does any of that really matter with Biden? At the end of the day, the whole thing was him hiding to beat Trump. Number one, if you go back to the 2020 Democratic primaries, they basically rigged it for Biden. The way that they did that was they were seeing that the vote was being split. And so they said everyone must drop out. Bernie Sanders might win. Go ahead and endorse Biden so we can bring all of the vote, the 5% from Buttigieg, the 3% from whoever, bring it all into Biden, and it helped him defeat Bernie Sanders. And that was done to get Biden in and above Bernie Sanders. And then obviously the election happens. Trump is dealing with, it is kind of crazy how no Democrats, I haven't even heard one Democrat ever say, yeah, Trump running for re-election when his biggest asset, the economy, had to, they forced him to shut it down for a month. It probably would have been longer. Then they said Trump handled the pandemic badly by not caring about it enough. And then they said, well, he should have shut down for longer, which would have made the economy more catastrophic. So there's really no way to win when it comes to that. But we're not going to do revisionist history on it. But it is kind of funny, Biden being aided by the pandemic, staying in his basement, not having to do rallies, and then having all the mail-in ballots, the historic vote count, and not really doing anything with it. When you look at his 2024 situation, his approval rating was terrible ever since Afghanistan. He came in, they gave him a 54% approval rating when Trump came in back in 2017 because the media had synced all the general public, his approval rating. Trump's approval rating day one in office, first ever time serving any public office, was 43%. He got zero grace from the American people. Biden starts at 54%. Last day in office, Biden is lower than Trump. That's after January 6th for Trump. Shows you how bad of a job that Biden did. And they try and manipulate it and say, well, no, Biden brought it back. And so you already know what they're going to do. And it's important to counter this when it comes up. Trump's going to have a really good period here. And then they're going to say, oh, it's thanks to Biden. And the only reason Trump was good and his economy was good until COVID was because of Obama. Well, no, Obama's approval rating went down because there was stagnation within the GDP. It was like a 1.6% GDP growth. It was like the lowest since 2000. It's a very low, but they never talk about that. They're obsessed with Obama. They won't say a single bad thing about him. And remember, there was so much going on with Obama that kept his approval rating up. But either way, guys, listen, we'll have to see what happens with the inauguration, but we are happy that Trump is coming in, and I'm like bleeding from my ear. But that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.